Well, you were talking about business the other time. It's time for business. Ini, what's the market saying?
This morning on Sunrise Daily. Welcome. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to 30 minutes of business right in the middle of Sunrise Daily. Let's start with the global space, with what's going on with grains. Chicago soybean futures rose further on Wednesday, with prices climbing to their highest in more than a week on support from short covering, although expectations of record South American supplies limited the gains. Let's look at the number right there. Soybeans, we see, is in the green, 0.2%. The price is now at $12.41 for a quarter of a bushel. And we can tell you that commodity funds were net buyers of CBOT soybeans, soy meal, soy oil, corn, and wheat futures contract yesterday. So you see soybeans is also up 0.2%. And then also looking at some of those factors driving the prices for corn, attention was turning to planting for Brazil's second annual crop. Forecasters expect lower production from Brazil's second corn crop, reflecting a smaller planted area. There we have corn up, talking about corn right there, 0.2% up at $4.47 for half of a bushel. There are also doubts about Chinese demand that are also providing headwinds to the market, with Brazilian exports posing stiff competition to the United States. We know that the U.S. is getting a lot of competition from that Asian part of the world. Now we go to global oil. Oil soared between modest falls and gains on Wednesday as traders weigh the impact on prices stemming from escalating geopolitical tensions, concerns over tepid demand, and a stronger dollar. A lot of factors pushing the oil market at this time. The front month March contract for Brent crude, we see right there, it's up 0.44%. That's a lot of movement, you know, at $79.92 for a barrel. WTI from the United States, that's the U.S. stock, is also up 0.44%, $74.71 a barrel. And now the factors driving it: U.S. crude stocks fell 6.67 million barrels in the week ended January the 19th. That's according to market sources, citing American Petroleum Institute. Also, gasoline inventories increased 7.2 million barrels, stoking concerns over fuel demand in the world's top oil consumer. These are the factors. Now, a stronger U.S. dollar is weighing on oil prices and demand from buyers. And you know, when there's a stronger dollar, that means oil will be more expensive, so you have less demand. The dollar index we see from yesterday hovered near a 6-week high against the major pairs on Wednesday, as investors cemented the expectations that Federal Reserve would be in no rush to cut interest rates, unlike what we thought by the end of last year. There's also the coalition of 24 nations led by the United States and the UK conducting new strikes against the Houthi fighters in Yemen. On Tuesday, the strikes were aimed at stopping the Houthis' attacks on global trade. Now, talking about forecasts, let's come back to Nigeria now. It's a season of forecasts. We've seen forecasts from every reputable organization or agency on what to expect in 2024. The latest to join that is the Chartered Institute of Bankers. They had their meeting yesterday, and they had a house full of economists and the young ones also. Let's get that report. Economic outlooks for the year 2024. The Chartered Institute of Bankers is contributing to the conversation with a tilt to impact on businesses. The experts in related fields are in attendance, but also are the youths. Exposing them to the realities of doing business in Nigeria is the intention.
That this step was necessary.
President of CIBN, Mr. Ken Okpara, joins virtually. He welcomes the panel and other attendees and leaves the floor for discussions. The tone is set by the Director of Monetary Policy at the Central Bank of Nigeria, Dr. Mohammed Tumala, who represented the Deputy Governor Economic Policy. The forecast from the CBN is optimistic for 2024.
The mining, electricity, gas and water supply subsectors amounted to 58, 52, 51 and 69 index points, respectively, indicating, of course, a positive trend.
Then the panel takes over. The outlook is not positive for some of the panelists.
If you have a material increase in cost of lending or cost of credit, what you are going to witness is that these sectors, which I have mentioned that are growing at very slow rates, will not be able to generate the kind of cash flow that will enable them to be able to meet their interest payment obligations and talk less of loan principal repayment. So you're going to have increase in default.
2024 should also be a year to look closely at the gas sector.
Nigeria's potential with gas, value-wise, is greater than what we extract from crude oil. And over decades now, not years, instead of, let me use the word everyone understands, is the capturing the gas, we flare it. And then, of course, we had investment in LNG, as you said. And what we have done so far is expropriate 48% of the capacity, which means we still have unused capacity to start with. Secondly, even what we produce oftentimes, in actual fact, have been budgeted for 25 years.
However, there are strategies for way forward.
People talk about comparative competitiveness. Okay? That's what it should be. Comparative competitiveness. Because comparative advantage is not it anymore.
It's the good and not so good, and the participants have to study both sides for progress.
We are seeing some very good policies, from government. And I think what I will advise is really look at policies that have worked. We have quite a number of policies that have worked and learn from them. Okay, and look at policies that have failed and essentially just drop them.
For CIBN, the success of the event is not enough. Following up for implementation is next. Obviously, great ideas right there. And as the DG of SEC said, policies that have worked should be followed up, while those that seem not to be working should obviously be dropped. So it's everybody's business, of course, if you want a progressive economy. And some of them there, one of the things they talked about, looking at gas. We know that started last year, 2023, but we know there are hurdles. For instance, the CNG, which is being preached. How easy is it for individuals, homes to start with, not even businesses, to convert their devices, generators, cars, to CNG? Where are the sports? We've heard of making it easy. There are loans to make it easy, but how accessible are those? Well, these are issues we will discuss in 2024. As the CIBN has said, this is the outlook for it. Now, just before we get to our conversation, the three tiers of government have received a total sum of 1.127 trillion naira. I think this is about the second time it's getting into trillions from the Federation Account Allocation Committee, that's FAC, as revenue distribution for the month of December 2023. We know this number increased about 200% at the point of removal of subsidy. According to the statement that was released by FAC, the amount is higher by 39 billion naira when compared to the 1.088 trillion that was shared in November. A brief breakdown shows that the federal government received 383.87 billion naira. States got 396, slightly higher than what they have. Lower than what they have for the federal government. And then local government councils received 288 billion naira, while 57.91 billion naira was shared as 13% of mineral derivatives revenue to relevant states. Meanwhile, the balance in the excess crude account was unchanged at $473,754, and that was from yesterday. Now, one of the things, economic conversations that just concluded was at Davos, and we had great representation there. We had Juliana covering the grounds for us. We've had such meetings year in, year out. That was the 54th edition, and Nigeria was very much there. I remember that the vice president led the team, actually covered one of the sessions where he spoke. But do these meetings and forums, do they come and make any impact, or do we just sit down and talk and go back to our homes? We had conversation of the UK not giving a lot of prominence to Davos, the Davos meeting, asking actually what do you take home and what action point do you implement? Well, let's talk to someone who was there, couldn't get here before now. It ended on Friday. We have Bolaji Shofoluwe. She's the Group Managing Director of ETK Group. She was there at Davos and now joins us. Remember, the theme was rebuilding trust, and we'll bring it home to what it means to Africa and specifically Nigeria. Hi, Bolaji. Good morning. Thank you for your time.
Good morning, Ini, and thank you for having me today.
Yeah, so, I mean, sometimes we talk about these meetings. Do we just have our leaders go to these meetings, the latest one, of course, being the World Economic Forum, and meet friends, old friends and new ones? Do we see the impact, really?
Well, do you know what? Thank you, Ini, for starting the conversation on such a very, a real basis, really, as in what do we do at these events? ETK Group has been facilitating trade between Africa and the rest of the world for the last 14 years, and we've done this in 34 different countries. And the central theme, every time we try to connect businesses, every time we try to facilitate trade and investment, is trust. And one thing I can tell you for a fact is that even though the theme for this year was rebuilding trust, I have argued that there was no trust in the first place. African countries are always on the high-risk categories for several banks around the world. So how do you then facilitate very simple trade instruments such as letters of credit, etc.? And so when the world leaders come together to discuss, they come from a very different perspective. They're not really there understanding the grind of the businesses on the ground, actually trying to transact internationally. And I think in the future, they really do need to bring in more business leaders, not necessarily the Dangotes of this world. They need to bring real business leaders facing constant challenges that actually are the wheel for global trade to the table to bring their views and air their views at these meetings.
So, I mean, I like to be real. I like to really feel. So I hear you when you say the real businesses, not like the Dangotes. These are the big guys. But how do you see that process? I mean, I know about Nigeria. I live in Nigeria. I've lived in Nigeria my life. So when you talk about, for instance, getting the real businesses in Nigeria, for instance, we talk about the reality of getting them on board. Do we have the government reaching out to SMEs or at least medium businesses, reach out to the entrepreneurs, sponsoring them? Because we know recently the federal government has cut, the entourage that travels and all of that, and it's all in the bid of reducing expenses. So do you see it going that way if we really want to make these things count?
Right. So I wanted to just correct an impression. I wasn't actually at Davos, but I was watching Davos very closely, and I watched Juliana's coverage as well as my other friend and other television stations' coverage quite closely. And one of the reasons for that is there is almost no space for smaller businesses to make themselves, relevant at these meetings. However, what I will encourage from from government leaders when they're going to these kinds of events would be to have, if you like town hall meetings to discuss the opportunities that they are looking at and the barriers and challenges that they are facing to be able to take advantage of these opportunities and take that real world perspective to these meetings so that they actually feel the effects of these high level conversations. This happens all the time where smaller to medium sized businesses feel locked out of major discussions that affect their day-to-day activities.
So we had a conversation on our news at 10 on Sunday, at this weekend at the close of Davos and all of that. And analysts there did try to compare attention given to, for instance, Africa Economic Forum, which is local, at least to us on the continent, and things like World Economic Forum. And it seems like countries like Nigeria benefit more from trade with international and not African. And that's one of the reasons, you see a lot of attention given to those. But when it comes to like African Economic Forum, we hardly hear of it or see so much interest. Apart from the fact that we still go to these meetings and then come back. I mean, For instance, the meeting has ended since Friday. I don't know if there are meetings to transfer knowledge or connections, even at the end of it.
Or even a published communique, Ini. Thank you so much for that. One of the things that, that should be the focus of African governments, an Africa Economic Forum, where there are conversations about how they can trade better with each other. Obviously, we've seen that the legislation is in play, the regulatory framework is in play through the Africa Free Continental Trade Area Agreement. That is something that can really change the fortunes of businesses where it comes to trading with each other on the continent. We hear that magic number of an increase of 29% of trade, intra-Africa trade by 2035. But that's not going to happen if we don't prioritize our own economic forums or prioritize our own economic or business meetings that would actually transform the perspective of businesses on the ground. And like you rightly said, if we don't come together and take our own things seriously, then nothing is going to happen. I said previously that Africa controls, and we must not forget this, Africa controls 30% of the world's natural resources. 40% of the gold comes from Africa, and 90% of our chromium and platinum in the world comes from this continent. There is no reason we should be having conversations about weak currencies. There is no reason we should be having conversations about poverty if we really wanted to harness the opportunities and the natural resources. And one of our major advantages on the continent as well is our intellect. Africans are innovative. And if we'll come together and put our skills together, there is no telling what can be achieved on the continent.
Do I hear you say that perhaps we are not believing in ourselves enough to take ourselves and our resources as seriously as we should?
I don't think we are, but when we talk about rebuilding trust, trust needs to be rebuilt between African countries as well. I think, the whole idea of Africa being divided into countries based on, previous colonial masters has actually been quite an issue for us. You have the Francophone, the Anglophone, the Lusophone, where law and order is conducted in very different ways and forms. In even the policy integration that needs to be done with the AFCFTA is quite, onerous, really, because when you think about the differentiations across the continent, they're actually quite vast. So I think that's the starting point. We need to trust each other. We need to think about the walls that we've built around each other and how we can bring them down. And even though Africa has always been subdivided into trading blocks, it hasn't necessarily translated into Africa trade. So we need to find out what the problems were with the existing trading blocks and then think about how we can integrate them and make them actually work. So I think trust is a major issue to start with. We say this as a joke, everywhere Nigerians go, the first thing is a red flag. People have to get to know you. We have to invest a lot of time in relationship building before we can actually do any solid business with anyone. And this has always been our lot. But it's the same with when an Egyptian interacts with a South African or a Somalian interacts with someone from Namibia. And that coming together needs to happen so that we can establish trust.
And I guess it's issues like this that has militated the growth of AFTA, for instance. That's a wonderful platform that has been created. And we see there's been fintech payment, inter-nations payment on that platform, but it doesn't seem to be moving as fast as it should.
But that takes me back again to what we discussed about, the innovative nature of Africans. I think the startups that emerged over the last 5 years did a lot for Africa from the perspective of PR cleansing, if that makes sense. A lot of people were suddenly interested in some of the innovation that was coming out of the continent. And I understand what you're saying about the PAP system not being as efficient as most people want it to be. But I think, the other thing is people need to try. People need to try, banks need to get behind it, and we need to see a lot more interest in our own initiatives and in our own programs to see our continent move forward.
And, you know, some of the major issues that was discussed at Davos, artificial intelligence, adoption, climate change, even at the COP28 also it was climate change. How do we adopt this so that the people who are back home in Africa can actually feel connected? When we talk about rebuilding trust, it's sometimes because people feel they talk over their heads, things that they are not really connected to. So coming back now, artificial intelligence, we know, is the future of the world, whether you're in Africa or outside of Africa. Climate change, we feel the impact every day. But how do we bring this message home and get the people back home to connect with it?
So at ETK, we just launched our ESG practice. And I was talking to one of my colleagues in Kenya, and he said, Balaji, there is no word in Swahili, excuse me, for sustainability. And so we need to get there first. We need to do the education piece first for people to understand, you know, exactly what's at stake for Africa in the global climate discussion. Do Africans actually know that we are suffering most of the effects of climate change in the global south, and we're the least offenders? You know, are we carrying a voice of confidence to global meetings to discuss some of these issues? And are we making sure that mitigating factors are being put in place to reduce pollution and to introduce practices within our businesses that make our businesses sustainable and climate friendly? And all of these conversations, there's a whole education piece around it first before you can actually work with businesses to implement them.
All right, the education is where we start from. I wonder whose shoulder that burden falls on, but I guess the media, of course, has its own share, which is one of the why even here on channels we do have Earth File where we talk about this. But thank you so much for your time, Bolaji Sofolue, a Group Managing Director of ETK Group, for sharing your thoughts with us this morning.
Thank you so much for having me, Ini. I usually love the conversations with you.
Thank you so much. All right, now let's head to the markets now and see how it fared yesterday. Well, we're still blooming, still looking really good. That's for the NGX. At this time, almost 3% is what we got yesterday. And listen to this. Nigeria's equities market gained more than 1.5 trillion naira at the close of trade yesterday. Is there investment there? Did you make some money? I don't know. Well, equities cap yesterday was up 1.56% at 53.967 trillion naira. So we had about 1.5 added. Remember, we closed at 52 the day before. So it's a booming market at this time. The Fugas, my favorites, unfortunately, I still love them, even though they're red. They were down. Profit taking is catching up with them. Consumer goods, however, lifted, as well as industrial goods. Insurance, you know, those penny stocks beginning to get attention. Well, the thing with the market is you can't be up all the time. You have to go up, and then investors will actually take the profit. Now, this is the reigning counter at this time, oil and gas. It seems attention is shifting from banking to oil and gas at this time. And we know that the secret behind is the Dangote refineries. A lot of conversation going on about the structure or the restructuring of how outlets or retailers will get products from there. And some of those retailers that are listed on the market are getting attention at this time. It might be a good time for you to jump on board. I don't know. I'm not giving any advice on that. That's for the sectors. Looking at the top trades for yesterday, Transcore was up 77.171 million naira. That was its trade. And then you have profit taking from these guys. That's the banking, Sterling and UBA. They were down because the counter lost yesterday. Let's see the top gainers. Seplat, excuse me, Seplat yesterday is the one invoked. Now, the other day it was MRS, but Seplat was on yesterday, gained 10%. Boa Cement, Dangote Cement, the star of this season, is still on, thanks to Mr. $10 right there. Market move, I guess he's Elon Musk, yeah? Okay, so let's see the top losers for yesterday. TIP, PZ, and Veris Copper PZ industry, we know recently that Unilever did announce that they're going to stop some of their very household product. They're going to stop the production. That counter is not feeling too well at this time. A lot of headwinds hitting it from different parts there. So it's not just the equities market. Let's go to the federal government bonds for yesterday. We had, there you have the value of 7.20 for the June 253, and then also February 2028. The bond calendar is out. You might want to check it out. Perhaps you want to do some save investment, less risk, you know, because with this, in the money market and the fixed income market, it's set, the rate is set, so you're sure of what you're going to get. April 2029 also did get some attention. Let's see other bonds now. The NTB Treasury bond had 29 deals valued at 47.12 billion naira, beg your pardon. And there you have the securities that got attention: January 2025, April 2024, March, and then September later on this year. This is going to mature in a few months. I know there'll be, the secondary market might be busy because, you know, it's almost time. Do we have the central bank? Okay, this OMO had 105. That's a lot of movements for one day for the secondary markets right there, valued at 131.68 billion. I guess tomorrow we're going to get an analyst to give us views and a little bit of backstory on the fixed income market, so we're not too carried away with just the equities market, which is our darling at this time. But I think this is where I'll have to hand over back to the Sunrise team, Neota, Chamberlain, and Ayo. I guess we have done enough of business right here. Back to you guys for your conversations.